evening, depending on where you are today. Thank you for joining the live stream. This is our first Tuesday live stream of the new year, so thank you for being here today. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope 2022 is off to a great start. We have an exciting guest for you here today, which I'm going to do formal introductions here in just a moment. But before I do that, what I thought we'd do is, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear where everyone's joining from today, on whichever platform you're listening or watching, whether you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, even Twitch. I think we're streaming to Twitch right now. So whatever platform you're watching on, we'd love to hear your feedback as to where you're at today, just so we get a good idea of where the audience is from. And secondly, if you have questions throughout the discussion today, I encourage you to please drop those questions in the chat box. We're watching all the streams right here, so we'll be able to see the questions as they come through. And don't worry about interrupting us. You can ask the questions whenever you have them, and we'll get to them as we get through the conversation here. So just to set the context for today's discussion before we jump in and do the introduction, I just want to set the context for the topic of discussion and the reason why I wanted this next guest to be on the live stream here today. First of all, I think one of the benefits of digital transformations, one of the opportunities in digital transformation is to learn from other organizations and look to see what's happening in the marketplace. What are some of the quantitative findings that organizations are experiencing? We all have anecdotal stories, we have hearsay, we have examples from our own qualitative history, but it's always helpful to look at data sets. And so I had the good fortune of being invited to an event in Germany late last year in October of 2021. And it was organized by our next guest. And in our discussions and as part of the planning and after going to Germany and being part of this event, I got to learn a little bit more about some of the research that he is doing in the digital transformation space. And it's truly fascinating because not many people do this work. So what I thought would be fun was to have him on our live stream, on our podcast, some questions about the research. What is he seeing in the market? What's some of the quantitative data telling him in his team in the research? So with all that being said, I wanted to introduce Professor Norbert Gronau. Thank you for being here today, Norbert.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for inviting me to this live stream.
Absolutely. And conversation. First of all, maybe just I haven't said much about your background other than the fact that you're a professor and you do research, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, where you teach, what your background is, et cetera.
Yeah, of course. I'm an engineer by study, and there's a noise somebody mentions. I don't know what the noise is from. And then I needed a job at the university, and I went to computer science, and I stayed there for a couple of years. I finished my PhD, and then I got tenure at another university, and all the time I did some consulting around ERP and all other business information systems, but only when a customer would call me and say he had a very difficult problem that other consultancies could not solve. So I came into the consulting area, and 10 years ago I founded my own consulting company, Potsdam Consulting and Advisory. And I think our insights, and I will come to research and to the combination of research and practice in a minute, especially when you ask me some questions about that. Our special insight is that we look at the technology. So what is actual current technology, but we are not computer science guys because we do not ignore people. We do not ignore users, managers, middle managers, and so on. And we think additionally that the process, the business process, the value generating process is also quite important. And so we have this triangle, and we always see in research and in consulting the sides of this triangle.
Right. So you've been in this space for quite some time. You're in addition to your consulting, you're also a professor at University of Potsdam. What courses do you teach there? Maybe tell us a little bit about your academic side.
Yeah. Well, yesterday I taught both sides of the scale. First, for beginners, business administration and information systems beginners, I taught some SQL, structured query language, very basic. Instructions, and then later on for our master program I told architectures of business systems, of information systems in business. So these huge landscapes that huge companies like the telecom companies, the airline companies, car manufacturers have, hundreds of different information systems, and how to manage in practice these information systems to keep pace with technology advance and with the business advancements. So this is both sides of the scale I taught yesterday the same morning. Yeah.
Great. So you've got a pretty varied background, ranging from detailed beginner technology sort of technical courses all the way to some of the more strategic stuff, which we'll talk about.
Exactly. That makes the profession so interesting. And we have the saying in Germany: if you can do it, then you should do it. If you can't do it, then teach it. And sorry to say that, if you can't teach, then go into consulting. So I'm in all three areas. I'm doing, and I'm also in consulting, and sometimes I also teach.
Here we are.
Yeah. So okay.
So quick question for you then, and sorry to interrupt. I lost my feed for a second there, so I missed part of what you said. But I wanted to ask you a quick follow-up question on the ERP Congress, which is the event that I met you at for the first time in person. This was the event in October of 2021, and you asked me to speak at that event. Tell us a little bit about ERP Congress in Germany and sort of what was the impetus for that, and then we'll get into some of the questions about your research after that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We organize this Congress every year as an event for around the ERP prize competition. We hand out an award every year for some of the best ERP vendor companies and the best ERP products in Europe, or in the German-speaking countries at least. And this is there's a fight every year of to get this award, to be awarded with this thing. It's like an Oscar for the ERP industry.
Pretty big deal.
And around this award ceremony, we organize a conference and invite some famous keynote speakers like you, Eric, in the last year, and we try to inform neutrally, so without taking any sides, what is happening in the areas of technology, what should companies do when they have a problem with their existing ERP system, or when they want to go into new businesses, or want to find out what's the advantage of using AI, or whatever, big data, or analytics, or something like that. It's a 2-day event, and we are a little bit exhausted afterwards, but it's a very good event because it's the main German ERP event. You can name it that way.
Okay, great. Yeah, it was a great event, and even though there was a lot I didn't understand because so much of it was in German, it was very good content from what I could gather out.
Thank you very much.
I had Google Translate open the entire time so I could enter words.
Oh, very good.
Translate to English because I don't speak German. But it was a very good session. I enjoyed it, and it was fun to meet you and other team members there too. So I guess to start, and actually I'm going to ask the audience a question, or ask them to respond to this real quickly, and then I'm going to jump into the questions I have for you. But for the audience, those of you that are watching this live, I'd love to hear, if you think about ERP and digital transformation research, or benchmarks, or data, what kind of data would you be looking for, as far as just things that would be of interest, or topics of interest, or data sets that might be interesting to help provide some lessons to your digital transformation project, wherever you might be in your journey? I guess that's more of a question for the audience, because I'd love to see kind of what what metrics would they expect to see, or what sort of metrics would they be interested in seeing from your data, assuming it exists. So while the audience is answering that question in the live chat here, question for you then is maybe just give us a little bit of an overview of some of this research you've done over the years. What does it look like? What were you trying to find? What was the impetus for the whole thing?
Yeah, we started 20 years ago when I was invited to a big German car parts manufacturer. He made the gearboxes, and I was asked, we have a tiny requirement to change in our information system. I don't say the name of the vendor, but it's one of the main vendors of ERP systems in the world, and it's not coming from the US but from Germany. We have a tiny new requirement, a very tiny requirement, and it costs us millions, literally millions of dollars or euros to fix this tiny requirement. Can't there be a more adaptive, we coined the word adaptive or changeable enterprise system that is much easier to adapt to new requirements. So that was our first task in research, and we came up with a lot of ideas how new architectures of ERP systems should be provided. But to make it short, nearly none of these ideas is made it into practice because we have this relational database paradigm, and we have some applications running on application servers, and the data models grow and grow and grow, and the data itself also grows. And so the systems are becoming complex and even more complex. And when you read about missing success with implementing new ERP systems, that's partly also a problem of the complexity. And there are even some people outside that think interfaces between different systems are bad, and you should try to integrate everything into one single system. That I don't know whom that helps, but it does not help conquer or even manage the complexity. So that was the first task. And then we started another thing that we are continuing to do. We count beans, not beans, but numbers of installations of ERP systems in the German-speaking market. German-speaking market is about 120 million people, so it's not very big, but a lot of small and medium-sized ERP vendors are located in these German-speaking countries. I mentioned one, I didn't mention it by name, but I mentioned it by the place of birth in Germany, in Waldorf, Germany, one of the big vendors stemming from there. It's a huge one, the SAP, but there are many, more than 300, 400 smaller ones. And then later, when we looked into other countries, we see these small vendors in nearly every other country, whether it's South Africa, it's the UK, it's the United States. You can sustain an ERP business as a vendor when you have 30 to 50 people working for you. Then it's sustainable. It will not grow, and it will not adapt all new technologies and business opportunities very fast, but you can survive. And so we have the situation that we have 300 different ERP systems, and that's part of my consultancy to find out which is the best long-term. Long-term means at least for 10 years for my customers. Yeah, and on the other hand, perhaps we will come to that as well. On the other hand, the vendors are also the small and medium-sized vendors ask me and my team at the university. I have about 45 people running or working for me at the university, and they ask me, we read about new technologies like AI. Now the main technology where what I can overview, the ERP vendors make some investments in. The main technology is AI, artificial intelligence. So they desperately try to make more use of the huge amount of data they collected. But we see, and we can come to it in a minute. We see that there are, of course, some other capabilities required. Not only technology, not only developers, but some other capabilities are required. So this is. We see the technology, we see the process, we see the business advantages, all of the business disadvantages, and you prepared some very nice questions. What are the issues? What do I recommend? Perhaps we come to that later. Yeah.
Right. Well, I guess just to start then, that's a helpful overview of sort of the two threads or the two main drivers of why you started this research and what problem you were trying to solve or what questions you were trying to answer. But when you look at just ERP implementations, digital transformations in general, what were some of the, you've been doing this a long time, but what are some of the biggest findings you have, whether they're quantitative or qualitative findings from your research? What are some of the biggest lessons?
We can distinguish several phases. In the first phase, it was just automation. No, it was not even automation. It was just bringing manual processes to computerized processes. Not very much automation, but you wanted to have your data on a computer to be able to be accessed from anywhere and from more people than before. That was the first phase. That went till I would say the early 2000s. So then there came a phase of consolidation because there was not so much innovation in the ERP area, more functionality, yes, and more specific data models, yes, but no innovation. Then many managers in companies came to the conclusion ERP is quite expensive, and we can cut cost on ERP. We can lift. We do not need a maintenance contract. We do not need upgrades anymore. We do not need qualified people in our company, but we can always call India for support. And this is the second phase. We see that a lot of competitive advantage vanished in this period of time, and since I would say 3 to 5 years we have the third phase, and this is the taking the ERP system as the backbone of the business information processing and trying to implement innovation like AI, like big data, like analytics and so on, and but not only into ERP, but in other systems connected to the ERP landscape. And this is the third phase. And this makes more fun, of course, because if you always have cost-cutting discussions, that's no fun at all, because it does not end with the vendor. It also comes to you as a consultant. But if you see companies that want to spend money to improve their competitive ability with IT, then the fun starts. And then then Corona came, the COVID virus. Then in some companies the fun just stopped again. But we have some e-tailers, so e-commerce retailers that did very well during the COVID pandemic, and they spent tremendous amounts of money to improve their competitive ability and to make their processes better. And that's the third stage. Well, yeah, your company is also named, but this is a parallel I didn't think of before. This stems from our observation of nearly 2,000 ERP projects in the last 20 years in the German-speaking countries. So these three stages, and now we are in a fun state on the one hand, last sentence, but on the other hand, some companies that thought IT is not important, people that know of IT are not important, they don't do well now. They have problems. They have real problems now.
Interesting. So the three phases, then you had the first stage, which was the sort of the initial automation. Second stage,
computerization. I would call it computerization. It's Okay. Now we can talk. We can speak of automation, but in the first years it was just computerization.
Yeah. Just taking manual processes and moving them to computers.
Yeah.
second stage was cutting costs, but
Yeah,
potentially at the expense of also cutting value, business value.
yeah,
And then the third
absolutely.
stage now is the sort of the competitive advantages using digital to further
Yeah.
their business models. What are in this third stage that you're seeing now in the last 3 to 5 years? What are some of the big findings? I mean, what are what are some of the trends or some of the data sets or high level metrics that really stand out or jump out, from your research?
Yeah, I see the AI trend, artificial intelligence trend, is more a trend for vendors for now. It's not
Hmm.
where the customers, my customers, my customers from the industry ask me what what can we use AI, and I tell them, well, you need you need the data, you need the models to for prediction, and you need the use cases, and then you can start. And when we look at the data, it's this master data management topic is some topic that does not work well in most companies. So they have very individualistic data sets, and AI in the ERP area doesn't work well with very scarce data sets. The AI works well when you have millions of unique data, but not when you have there a little bit and there a little bit, and no bridge between it. So that's one of the problems. What we have a question here from the audience about value, the value of ERP and the value of these investments. So what we do, what we always try to do, is to calculate the value of the investment. We do this of the ERP or the IT technology investment. We do this while we compare the actual state with the old processes and the old functions with the intended state, when we have automated processes and when we have all system functionality available. Because that is sometimes different when you use a system with a huge functionality. You have more functions, but system is sometimes also more expensive. And on the other hand, you can get a lot of improvements, like in manufacturing and logistics, when you use a smaller and cheaper system. So, and we compare this, and when you compare this, then you always can come up with some productivity gains, with the opportunity to reach more revenues or to cut cost on stocks and things like that. And that is there are some sums that are big. So big means 6 or 7 figures, and some are very small. And of course, no company we investigate has more than 20 ROI potentials in their processes, but otherwise they would no longer exist when they had 100. Or we always go into the company with about 300 or 400 questions about ROI. Always covering one single functionality, and 20 turn out as valid, and then we can sum it up and come up with some information about the potential value. And this is in one case, the investment is 7 million over 7 years, 7 million, and we can compare euro and US dollar here for this interview. 7 million in 7 years, and the yearly return on investment is about 2.5 million euro. So that means in 3 years, your 7 years costs are covered, and then you are not only even, but you are better than before. This information is quite necessary for some of the companies, because they have to report to boards or to owners, or the publicly noted, and then they have to figure out they have to justify their investment in IT, because money is always scarce, and everybody in manufacturing loves to buy new machines because you can see the machine for 5 million. Even if the machine is not running, you at least have the machine standing in your factory. But a new enterprise system, a new IT, you do not see anything. You see a new icon on your browser, and this is €2 million or $2 million for a new icon. That's quite expensive. So it's absolutely necessary that you need to calculate the business value, and we have some experience with that, with this calculating the value. Unfortunately, not all our customers want to have us calculating the value. Some say, well, it's self-evident that we need a new system, and then we calculate the cost, or the vendor calculates the cost of the new system, and then they say, well, it's quite expensive, and can't we come up with another solution? And then we wished we had calculated also the business value. So business value is quite important, and it's possible to calculate it, but you need a little bit of experience for that.
So is that the numbers you just mentioned, the $7 million total investment and then the 2.5 million annual return? Is that an average in your data set? Is that the average cost and ROI for the average?
No,
or is that
well, it depends from many factors. It depends, as you know, how many users you have, concurrent users or named users, how many application consulting is necessary. So it's I try to convince my business customers when there is an ROI over 2 to 3 years, then the investment is fine. Because you have always an acceleration curve in learning, so you can't use 100% of your new system from day one, but you slowly discover new information there and new value, and but after 1 or 2 years you know everything what is necessary, and then you have the full potential there. So 2 years is fine. In some cases, in very rare cases, there is no business value. Or no sufficient business value, but some of these companies have neglected their IT, their ERP for 10 to 20 years. I once met a company that had no maintenance contract for 20 years, 21 years, no maintenance contract. So that means they have a software solution that was probably invented in the 1990s. For Windows 95, and now we have different times here, and there is no business value because the investment is now huge, but it's nevertheless necessary.
So what percentage approximately, if you had to, I don't know if you have this exact data in front of you or in memory, but approximately how many digital transformation and ERP projects do you think receive a positive ROI within 2 to 3 years, as you mentioned, in this third stage we're talking about? I know 10 or 20 years ago, maybe it's a different number, but more recently, what kind of metrics are you seeing there? Looks like we just lost Norbert, so I'm going to give him a second to come back on here, and he's back. There he is.
Yeah, I'm back. So I got your question, but your question was how many of these projects have a positive ROI from the third stage? Well, unfortunately, we observed post-mortem, post-project 2,000, around 2,000 of these projects. But of course, nearly nobody wants to tell us what was the investment. They only tell us what was the number of licenses they bought, and but nearly never they tell us how much consulting effort they spent. So I cannot come up with a key figure how much is the success rate. But I can say when it will be absolutely not successful, when IT is a commodity, when you don't build up knowledge in your company on ERP, and when you are not bold in your decisions, and fourth and last, when you do not hold to your initial objectives, so your initial goals, what you wanted originally to achieve with the new system. So
Right.
when you don't do this, all of this, then you won't be successful.
So you see the correlation of what
Yeah.
not to do,
Yeah.
and the negative impact it has on your outcome.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense from your quantitative and qualitative data of whether or not with new emerging technologies like AI you mentioned before,
Yeah.
it's more of a thing for vendors? Vendors are more focused on AI than actual end users, which I totally agree with. By the way, that's what we see with our clients as well. It's
Yeah.
very immature in terms of real use
Yeah.
cases. But with these new emerging technologies that have a certain price tag that go along with it, and even cloud solutions too, where you have ongoing subscriptions and sort of a higher annual ongoing cost, are you seeing a trend, either positive or negative, towards getting more or less of an ROI, even though you don't have exact numbers, because a lot of companies aren't sharing the exact cost or the exact benefit? Do you have at least have a sense of where the needle is moving? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? What do you see there?
Well, it depends how the project is conducted. When the project is conducted in a nice manner, and not everybody who has a wish or a requirement gets this requirement implemented, then you can get a huge ROI and business value. Especially when you stay to your original goals and objectives, what you wanted to achieve in the market. But the problem is the situation, the environment is changing. The company management changes, ownership changes, the economic environment might change for some companies. We have some legislation in Europe, like these GDPR topics that cost a lot of money and helps nearly nothing for the customers. So it's not quite easy, because the subject of study, the company and the ERP system, does not stay in the same state for 2 years or for 3 years. If you compare your companies, you observe from 2019, which was pre-pandemic, to 2022, you will find out that the organization has changed, the business model in some cases has changed, the products have changed, customer behavior has changed. So that's the problem of reality. Everything is changing, so it's not so easy to put something in concrete and watch it for 2 or 3 years. So unfortunately, I cannot say it's always 43%. That's therefore I'm too much professor to answer this in
right. You sound like me. It depends, right? It depends on what.
Yeah. But it's typically a lawyer would say it depends. Yeah.
Right. Or consultants or professors. I guess that's what we've established.
Yeah.
We all. So in the research you've done over the 20 years, whether, I'll leave you flexibility on how you want to answer this, whether you focus on the more recent third phase or stage of ERP implementations, or whether you look more longer term. What are some of the biggest surprises in the data? Like when you started consulting and then you do this research, what sort of jumped out as sort of a surprise to you, or something you didn't know? Maybe some big learnings from.
We always ask the customers, the customers that buy a new ERP system or use a new ERP system, what influences their decision. And of course, in the first years, functionality was on top. Functionality. And of course, that's the reason you buy a standard software system, because you want to have immediate use of a predefined functionality. But what comes then? In the early days, it was, of course, cost advantage and usability and things like that, because the older systems, like these green screen systems, had not a very great usability for tasks you did not do daily. For daily tasks, it was fantastic. I remember these United clerks at the gates at United Airlines, and you wanted to do a complex operation of rebooking your flight, and they clack, 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 and in 30 seconds they were ready, new boarding pass, a new invoice, collect your credit card, and so on. That was fantastic because they do it every day. But for in ERP, you have a lot of tasks you do once a month or once a year, and therefore usability was in need, very much in need. That has changed. Usability is no longer an issue, but the architecture, the technical architecture of the system is now the number two in deciding, in decision making on a new ERP system. And that was something that I'm always an architecture guy, but I'm a computer scientist by my PhD. But most of the managers out there are no computer scientists, but business administration people. And now they also decide to go for the good architectures. So we as consultants, and also we at the university have to come up with a judgment. What is a good architecture, not only for the ERP as a single system, but for the whole landscape of IT systems you have out there. And that's an interesting topic also for the next couple of years.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I mean, it fits what I believe to be important, but it's interesting to hear that buyers of enterprise technology are viewing that as a very important number two criteria. What are some of the other general trends? You talked a little bit about AI, and you talked about how the three different stages of transformation over the years. You've talked about how architecture is becoming more important. Technical architecture is becoming important in the evaluation process. What other trends are you seeing? What are some of the other trends that enterprise software buyers or potential buyers are aware of?
There is a very interesting gap between what vendors want. They want to get their customers into the cloud, and what the customers actually do, because they calculate, and in many cases, more than I expected, they come to the conclusion that cloud is way too expensive. So they do not go in that case, they do not go the whole way to the cloud, but they stop halfway and go, for instance, for hosting or housing or some other services in that area. So they no longer do it for themselves. They don't have the hardware in the basement and try to fulfill all the security requirements. But sorry for the noise here. But they don't go into the cloud like with completely new offers. So some offers like data storage or also analytics capabilities. We will see it also with AI when the AI models will be available. They will be in the cloud. They won't be ever available on the hardware in the basement of the factory. But with the traditional systems, at least what we see in Europe, it's not only Germany, it's Europe. We see customers are reluctant to go in the cloud. That's sometimes an infrastructure topic, but sometimes it's a trust topic. But sometimes, in most cases, it's a cost topic, because the cloud is cheap in the first year and in the second year, but afterwards it's expensive because the costs are the same every year, and a license is paid, and then you have usage of the license, you have maintenance contracts. But so cloud is not so fast in the ERP business, because ERP, I would not say this of CRM and of some other IT services like Office 365 and things like that. But for ERP, the cloud adoption rate is slow.
Yeah, and I think the vendors benefit more than anyone from this, and their investors benefit because you get a predictable, sustainable revenue model that's very high margin that investors like, vendors like it, and so therefore that becomes the talking point, which is cloud is better. Cloud is better. Everyone's moving to cloud. If you don't move to the cloud, you're dying. So I think it's a really good point that you bring up, which is, you can go to the cloud where it makes sense, but it doesn't mean you need to double down and just throw everything in the cloud right now, because
exactly.
it's cost. I'd be curious to see. I've always thought, and this is speculation or sort of hypothesis of what I think will happen in the future. You talked about that second stage of where companies sort of went from computerization to then how do we cut our costs to kind of cut back on our how much we're spending on IT. Do you think we'll see another phase of that after? So you get all these companies that are moving to the cloud, and then they wake up one day and realize, wow, we're spending a lot of money on these subscriptions that we can't get out of. Do you think there'll be a day of reckoning in 3 or 5 or 10 years where people will maybe shift back and maybe try to scale back their cloud contracts or move back to on-premise or do something different? Or do you think this is just where we're going?
I think no. I don't think they will shift back, but there will be more competition with cloud services because cloud services are more comparable to each other, and the step away from one cloud vendor or functionality vendor to a couple of vendors is easier when you are in the cloud, because the next possible service provider is for some bill of material calculation or warehouse management is only one click away. So we will see a competition there. I don't think that's my proposition. I don't think they will come back and install ERP systems under their desktops, but I think we will see more competition in the cloud competing on some services.
That'll start to drive some of that cost down, so you get more options. And
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. What are you alluded to this? You started to answer this indirectly related to another question, but maybe I'll ask it more explicitly here.
Yeah.
But that is what in your research, what are some of the issues or challenges that organizations are struggling with the most in their ERP implementations or digital transformations?
As I mentioned before, when IT is seen from the management as a commodity, like electrical power, then it comes to problems. So, it influences the competitive ability in both ways. If you go forward with your IT, it influences in a positive way. But if you don't go forward, it influences in a negative way, and you create cost in personnel, in management efforts, and also in IT maintenance efforts. And you can't cut these without giving you danger to your business processes. So this is what I see in some of the managers' decisions. They have not yet seen that IT is not the same like telephone service or like electrical power or gas, but it's something different. It's something that has to be invested in, and also knowledge has to be collected in the company. And I always tell my customers in consulting, you can't rely on forever on me. You have to find out something on your own.
Right. Yeah.
But only something, not everything.
Right. So coming back to this cloud trend question, I'm going to share a question here, which is from Malcolm on LinkedIn. He asked the question of how many on-premise systems will there be in 5 years? Do you have a sense of maybe a rough percentage? Or I know you probably don't have data that predicts that, or maybe you do. I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I told you that the transfer rate to the cloud is slow, and I would say we have, when I make a bold judgment now, we have in the German-speaking countries, I would say we have 80% of the systems are running on premise. When you also think that housing and hosting is also on premise, because it's an individual system on individual hardware, maintained in an individual state of software. So it's it's only the Ethernet cable. The Ethernet connection is different, but it's not cloud. Cloud means it's anywhere, and it may not even be on a certain hardware, and therefore I think 80% are on premise now. And now you ask me how much of this, I would say 70% will be on premise in 5 years. We should meet, Eric. We should meet at least in 5 years and
I will.
speak about that prediction. Yeah.
January of 2027. You're saying
Yeah.
that be so 10% more will be in the cloud? Oh,
yeah, only 10% more. Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting.
I may be wrong, but in the moment, I see adoption rate is quite slow and costs are very, very high. And every manager can calculate the costs and says, well, why should I do that? Where is my business advantage?
Right.
Yeah.
So you alluded a little bit to this last a few minutes ago, but I'll bring up this question from Andre on YouTube.
Yeah.
He asked the question of how has the pandemic influenced digital trends?
Yeah, we see a main influence, of course, in thinking of work from home. Some managers didn't want to have work from home before the pandemic, and we see it in the digitalization of the processes. So things that were never ever available before the pandemic are now easily done and implemented. I give you an example. What me astonished today, I'm working at a university. You know, university administration centers are never at the forepoint of innovation, and I had to clear an invoice, and I got an email, and I just had to click a link in my email, and I could do this on my iPhone. So I could say this invoice can be cleared on my iPhone by just clicking an email, a link on my iPhone. So, and that was a real advantage. And this public administration moved in only 2 years pandemic from we do everything on paper to we do everything digital now. So I use this example not because it's a prototype for doing business, but because even the most hard-minded or no-minded people at all now think, what can we do better in the processes? How can we advance and digitalize the processes? And that experience we see also in the companies, and also this work from home paradigm. We have this discussion all the time. You see Apple, first they should all work again in the headquarter, and now they say, well, you may work 2 days at home. So, and we see it in the German companies as well, that it does not depend to some extent where the work is done. To some extent, it's quite important. So we cannot cut social contacts completely. I would say 2 days at home and 3 days at the workplace might be good for both of for the employer and the employees. So I see things speeding up in the processes. I see very huge strains on the infrastructure because all these videos going on, and then you have to switch off your camera, and then then you are nearly dead. You have a meeting, an important business meeting with 8 to 10 people, and everybody has to switch off the camera. Then it's you can only work there when you know all these people very, very well. So
Right.
when you can listen to them and, oh, this might be a little bit snarky, but you can't do anything. So infrastructure strain in some areas, it's a huge problem. And well, the ERP vendors, they have to do something with robotic process automation, which is an automation on the desktop of the users. But that has nothing to do with the vendors itself, in my opinion, and that's what I see. Yeah,
Sure.
the yeah.
That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. What about this question? Actually, I'm gonna change this question a little bit. But the question is the German cloud market affected by German legal
Yeah,
requirements governing where data can be held and how secured? I would actually ask that question more globally because that's also a thing. And if you
yeah,
work for the United States government or you're a contractor to the United States government, you have certain data requirements and
yeah.
limitations, and privacy is becoming a big deal throughout Europe and other parts of the world. So maybe just in general, how do individual countries and their legal requirements affect the cloud market in general?
Yeah, it depends in which industry you are in. If you are in a very highly regulated industry, then there are some rules. If you are a state or government-owned entity, then there are certain rules. Um, some companies like e-tailer or retailer are free of that, and they have to take care of customer data and person related data to single persons, but that can be done well. That it has an influence. Yes, the cloud market is a little bit influenced by that. I would not say that we have this European initiative to come up with a European cloud solution, but this is called Gaia X. But it's it's an initiative from engineers, and you should think from the user. You should not think from the engineering point of view, and it's overcomplicated. This European Cloud Initiative. So Amazon, Microsoft, and some others, Google, are doing here a very good job, and show us where the data is in Europe. They have all the data centers in Europe, and for most of the not regulated companies, no military things, no drugs. I mean, in the positive sense, drugs, medicine, pharmaceutical companies. For most of them, that's not a problem.
Right, right.
In my opinion. Always, this is all my opinion,
Sure. Well, and it's
Sure.
an important one just based on what you're saying and the way companies are shifting. I think that's where we're getting to is just how are companies shifting and how's the economy shifting, how are regulations shifting, and that's just a good reminder of all the different things you have to navigate and stay in sync with as you go through an ERP project or digital transformation. So just a question, I guess I'd ask you around. A lot of your research is based in Eastern Europe or the German-speaking countries within
Yeah.
Eastern Europe. But what's different in that part of the world when it comes to ERP implementations or digital transformations? What's different there, unique there versus other parts of the world, or vice versa?
Yeah, we sometimes see also smaller vendors from other countries coming to the German market because they heard of Industry 4.0 and all these nice technological advances, and they also want to compete there. And then they, even very small ERP using companies, generate a huge amount of specific requirements for functionality, very specific functionality. And then these companies that come from very simple manufacturing sites, and they say, well, oh no, we can't do that. We can make a custom function for you especially, but that's no competitive advantage when you have to create a custom functionality for your first German manufacturing customer. So we are not very satisfied with good looking and fast working systems with not so much functionality. And also the data model. The data model is even more important. The people want to store all kind of information around their products, their customers, their machines, and so on. And that's they don't like it. I just had an American. I once had an American vendor, a smaller American vendor. No, it was even a huge one, but I don't say its name. And he was asked, please tell us, we have to make reports, monthly reports for the value added tax we have to collect in Germany for the government. And please show us your functionality. We think you are from the United States or from the UK, and perhaps you have not this functionality in your home country. So what do you think of this value added tax report? And the vendor from UK or US said, well, we have a very good report generator, and if you need this functionality, you can create it on your own. And he thought that would be a very good answer, but he was immediately out of the business, because that's such a basic functionality for all European companies, EU European companies, except the UK, that they don't want to create their own report for the government. They want to have it as a standard functionality. And so the requirements are quite complicated in most cases. Yeah, that's part of the problem. Yeah, with the German market.
Now, what about speaking of the German market? And this is another question that we could probably broaden to other parts of the world or other cultures. But how does the German culture affect implementation and adoption? And how is that different than implementations in other countries or other parts of the world?
Well, it negatively affects implementation and adoption, because we want to have a complete, clear picture of we want to have in the year 2027. And that's quite not, it's not quite easy. We're in an ERP implementation, and people want to, some of my customers also have this approach of perfection. They want to have it perfect, and they cannot live with 85 or 90% perfection. They want to have at least 100% and perfection, and that is counterproductive. That doesn't work well. So on the one hand, we can create with very nice machinery and also some very nice cars, because we can think 2 years what the new machine or the new car would look like, and then build it. But that does not work in implementation, in ERP implementation. We have to make it short. We have to make quick wins after 6 months to 9 months at least, but then you have to show something. And if you are preparing an implementation for 2 years, and then you are, some companies were 10 years in ERP implementation. So that's ridiculous, in my opinion. So we try to use agile approaches there, but you need trust. You have to trust the vendor when you start with an agile approach. Well, that's also difficult. So I think it's German culture not always helps.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny you brought up culture, because I was going to ask you as a follow-up. So you're saying that German culture may not embrace agile in the same way that other world or other cultures may. Yeah. But I think in general, it's a good reminder, though, that whether it's a geographic culture or whether it's an organizational culture or a combination of both, you really do have to think about, who are we as an organization and as a people, and how does that influence how we should be deploying new technology? Because I think a lot of people try to look for that cookie cutter, one size fits all best practice, but the examples you just gave are good examples of how that's not typically the case.
Yeah, that's not working, and that's for nobody in the European market. It's this cookie cutter approach a fitting approach? No, I would say that's that's absolutely not valid. It's even the other way around. When somebody hears that his main competitor has a system that he nearly also wanted to implement, then he immediately switches his decision to the other system, to the number 2 in the rankings, because he doesn't want to have the same system like his competitor.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, so last question for you then, that I've got for you is, based on your research so far, what advice would you give to an organization or a team that's about to start a digital transformation here in 2022? What's some of from your research, all the trends you've talked about, the things you're seeing in the market, what should people?
Okay, favor quick wins, acquire knowledge, be bold in your investments, and hold to the original objectives when you started your project. That's in one sentence my advice.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good summary, and those are things you mentioned earlier in the conversation as well. So that's super helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, good. Well, I appreciate you being here, Norbert. If people want to learn more about you, connect with you, ask you more questions,
they can connect to me using LinkedIn. Of course, I can be easily found on LinkedIn, and they of course they can connect to me using you as a proxy. And I see some more questions. Perhaps they can be answered in it later, or chatting to them.
Sure.
That would be also nice. Thank you very much.
So just for people that maybe aren't, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, I'll tag Professor Gronau on LinkedIn. But for those that aren't watching on LinkedIn or are going to have to go back to LinkedIn to find you, how do you spell your last name, just so people know how to find you?
Gronau. I don't. Let me see.
So it's Norbert Gronau. Gronau.
Gro. Yeah. Unfortunately, I didn't write it here on the. But you in your invitation, my name is quite correctly spelled. Yeah.
Yes. So if you can't find it, reach out to me and I can put you guys in touch. But appreciate you being here on the live stream today. I really appreciate it. And
thank you very much. It was a premiere for me this year, so thank you very much, and thank you for all your very good questions. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you to the audience for being here as well. And new live streams every 2 hours earlier than what we did today, but we wanted to accommodate.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Our guest schedule. But that's okay. I'm just for other people that might want to join these live streams on an ongoing basis. It's usually at 10 a.m. Eastern time in the United States, which I think is about 4 p.m. in Germany and other parts of Europe. So
when we meet again in 2027, then we do it.
Well, hopefully we'll have you on here before.
Yeah, we will meet before. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Happy New Year, and we will see you next Tuesday on our live stream. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.